Hello, we're beginning our next episode of Poland Daily Art in Palace, on an island. Welcome everybody, my name is Marcin Bąk.
I Janusz Janowski.
Because we are now in a beautiful classicist palace, not only when it comes to the architecture, but also the decorative art, we should talk about the next era in the history of art. This time, classicism. We always talk about the spiritual side of the era, so I think we should show the spiritual side of classicism as well. We indicated many times that matter is always ahead of the spirit. Some sort of transformation inside happens before someone takes a brush or sculptural chisel into his hand, or thinks of a plan of a palace or a garden. And it happens with masonry in the 18th century, of which we've already talked when we discussed other eras. And we have to talk about masonry today because it plays a huge role in this particular era. Indeed, let us remind ourselves that in 1776, so in the year which is celebrated as the official beginning of the United States nationhood, at that time a famous secret association called the Illuminati was established. And the spiritual intellectual trend was extremely enveloping. We can say that it was the trend of secret associations that began then. And it has had a huge influence, if not practically, at least in our own minds. We know that a section has functioned in Poland since 1727. We also know that many dignitaries, and not only representatives of the court, but also of the episcopate, were involved. This can be a big enigma. Priests and bishops started to join the masonry. The May 3rd Constitution was formed by people connected to the masonry. So the classicist trend has a huge impact on it, and it decides about the era's shape, its formation. The name classicism itself, in Latin, classicismum, is a perfect pattern. It should also somehow lead us to these spiritual thoughts. In Immanuel Kant's Ethics, we see a duty that brings to a certain, or leads to a certain kind of moralizing. One could say that it leads to a certain dependence on the state system. In the end, it will later be developed by Hegel, which will lead us to the apotheosis of the state. Yes, but the Kantian ethics say that you have to be an ethical, humble, and devoted man. But not without reason. Kant and Hegel are Prussian.
Tak jest, i pruscy, i protestancy, z ducha. Przy czym Hegel, jak wiemy...
Both Prussian and Protestant. Hegel, as we know, was involved in being able to become a pastor. He was deeply attached to all of this. However, classicism, as I mentioned, and David's oath of the Horatia painting is born when the French Revolution was being prepared. Well, that can sound inadequate, especially to some specialists, but it was born of great emotion. Yes, allegedly the Parisian people, following an impulse, initiated the revolution. But before that, the encyclopedists were slowly writing their texts.
Fryderyk II, czyli król filozof.
Let's look at Frederick II, a philosopher king who has an impact on this topic as well. Classicism also becomes the first trend in the field of art that could be described as propaganda, because the oath of the Horatia painting was conceived in the early 80s of the 18th century. It's just an announcement of the events that happened later. It's some kind of an introduction or preparation of something that we associate with a certain ideological persuasion or a kind of truthful propaganda, if you will. And here it is revealed in classicism. We're talking about classicism, which refers to ancient patterns, which is actually a mythological painting trend. But everything that is presented is a kind of theater detached from life. It is very interesting in combination with Baroque and Rococo Rococo. Baroque is the quintessence and emanation of life, and it emphasizes existence as the most momentous act of the world. Rococo was some kind of deception or transformation of this vitality into promiscuity and excess. Classicism breaks with Rococo's excess and with everything that describes Baroque. We talked about the fact that Baroque, as Jesuit art, had to be fought for in this era. Let us remember that in 1773, I believe, we could say, the first partition of Poland, the Cassata of Jesuits, of the Jesuit constituency, takes place. And this leads directly to classicism. This trend was established by the Cassata of Jesuits. The secret organizations such as Weishaupt's Illuminati or the Encyclopedias was foremost in the thoughts of Frederick II.
Czy Fryderyka Wielkiego II.
Voltaire.
Tak.
So we're talking about these various trends that characterize this era, the second half of the 18th century and the times of the French Revolution. And I have this impression of such a complete dichotomy, because on one hand, it's all about rejection of the superstitions which Freemasonry is obsessed with, but it's also a total reinterpretation of Christianity. So we could say a completely different look at religion. This is also the time of the canons of the modern science of the 18th century. And on the other hand, it's a time of dealing with an incredible explosion of esoteric practices, the Kabbalah, and various other such things, which claim they can transmute lead into gold, like alchemists, and even invoke the souls of the dead, leading to, we could say, the later movement in spiritualism. So how is it possible that such contradictory trends can coexist with each other? Let's say reason and, if you will, unreason at the same time.
Sprzeczne nurty ze sobą współgrają.
Ta sytuacja jest właściwie analogiczna do sytuacji z XVI wieku, o której mówiliśmy.
This situation is analogous to the situation of the 16th century, of which we spoke earlier, because actually the basis of this science was established at the time of Francis Bacon. As we alluded to earlier, intellectuals rejected the perspective of God. Although this is not entirely about the rejection of God in classicism, although this is not entirely about the rejection of God in classicism, it is about the changing interpretation of understanding. As I said, the deist vision, sometimes connected with pantheism, provides a basis here. The first thing that happens is one must reject the Holy Trinity. So this is basically a concealed attack on Catholicism, replacing it with another kind of spirituality. And here comes the element that is worth emphasizing, that there is not a complete and total detachment from considering concept of God. The Illuminati was strongly connected to the Jesuit environment. The state destroys the Jesuit method by introducing its secret society into their area. Every Jesuit, casuist, has their own leader. Leaders which were using the Jesuits in a negative way when they were confessing and also, let's say, writing their journals and diaries.
Każdy jezuita miał swojego prowadzącego, prowadzący dwóch takich adeptów. Ci adepci spowiadali się i pisali pamiętniki, tak by móc, by ich prowadzący mógł...
Meanwhile, Weishaupt did the opposite. The total surveillance, which is the basis of secret societies today, was actually born in the structure of Weishaupt's Bavarian Illuminati. What about that? So we can say this spirituality changes if we look at it in terms of Christianity. Okay, let's say this is a partial answer, because it is also worth paying attention to the fact that there is some kind of sacralization of temporality on the one hand and of matter on the other. This is where pantheism originates. That's where it comes from. Everything is penetrated by the divine soul. So that there is, in the strict sense, an idealization of nature and sacralization of nature, that is, making nature sacred above all things.
Boski, duszę boską, czyli jest idealizacja natury w sensie ścisłym, sakralizowanie tego, co materialne.